Hello, Saints. This is Bishop Eric Fredric from Rivers of Living Water, and today we're going to review a book called The Jews of Spain and Portugal and the Inquisition, which was written in 1877 by an author named Fredric David Macotta. And we're going to look at the link between the Spanish Inquisition and the transatlantic slave trade. And we know that the first 130 years, the Portuguese dominated the transatlantic slave trade. And we're going to look at where the Portuguese got these slaves from, these people that they enslaved. And we're going to look at those same slaves being scattered throughout the nations, going to Europe, going to America, going to Haiti, going to Jamaica, scattered to the four corners of the world. And we're going to look at these black Jews that were expelled from Spain and Portugal, and we're going to see what happened to them and where they went. So let's start a review of the book. And before we get into the review, let's deal with a term, and that term is the word Jew. The Israelites never referred to themselves as Jews. They referred to themselves as Israelites. If they lived in if they were part of the tribe of Judah, they referred to themselves as Judites. So for this lesson, I won't refer to them as Jews. I'll refer to them as Israelites. So the first thing I want you to remember is that the Spanish Peninsula is a colony of Phoenicians. And the Phoenicians are Canaanites. And every time you hear the word Canaanite, I want you to think about merchant or trader, because those two words, Canaanite, those three words, Canaanite and merchant and trader, are synonymous. And we also have to look at the relationship between the Canaanites and the Israelites. We know that when the children of Israel left Egypt, God told them to go to Canaan's land, and that was the land of the Canaanites. He told them to go in and destroy everybody, women, children, and not have mercy and just kill everything in the land. So you can just imagine the relationship between the Canaanites and the Israelites. You know, there was probably a lot of enmity between the two. And not only enmity between the people, but also enmity between the Canaanites and our God, because it was our God that gave the command to destroy all the Canaanites and to dispossess them of their land. Another thing to remember from this book is that the ancient name for Spain is Tarshish. So every time you read in the Bible the name Tarshish, that's referring to Spain. And Tarshish is one of the sons of Japheth, and you'll find that in the Table of Nations in Genesis chapter 10. And during the early persecution of the Israelites, a large number of them sought refuge on the African coast. So there was a large presence on the African coast of Israelites. And we know from the Bible that every time that Israel got in trouble, they would always run into Africa to hide and to blend in with the people because they looked like the people in Africa. The next thing I want you to remember is in the year 711, the black Moors, who were Muslims, invaded Spain, and within 5 years, they had completely taken over Spain and began to rule Spain. And if you look to the right, you'll see a map, and it contains the nations of Spain, Europe, Greece, Phoenicia, Asia, Egypt, Africa, and also the Mediterranean. And you'll see how whoever controls the Mediterranean Sea controls the trade between all of those nations. So if you look at the points where it has the red dots, those are Phoenician cities. If you look at the circle with a white dotted with white in the middle, those are Phoenician colonies. If you look at the green squares, those are areas of Phoenician settlements. And if you look at the red lines, those are Phoenician trade routes. So we see that the Phoenicians control the Mediterranean, control the trade on the Mediterranean. We see all the trade routes, and we see all the settlements. If you look at Spain, in the southern part of Spain, you'll see that that's a Phoenician settlement. And not only did they have settlements in southern Spain. They also had settlements in northern Africa, in Sardinia, and also in the southern part of Italy. So the Phoenicians, who were Canaanites, were very powerful people. And whoever controls the trade and the ports of a nation controls the economy, controls the politics and economics of that nation. So can you imagine that these Phoenicians would take the opportunity to take revenge upon the Israelites for what they did to them during the takeover of Canaan by the Israelites? So the picture to the right would show you the nations of Portugal and Spain, with Portugal being a smaller nation and Spain being a larger nation. But many times the kings and the queens of these two nations, Spain and Portugal, would marry one another, joining the crowns, and they will become one nation. One thing that really caught my eye when reviewing this book is that the Israelites were very intelligent people. The Israelites and the Moors worked together to establish education centers and colleges in opposition to the ignorance promoted by the Catholic Church. Israelites attained high honors and lasting fame as poets, philosophers, astronomers, mathematicians, physicians, and grammarians. They had a monopoly on physicians. Can you imagine what this would do if our people understood this? That we didn't just come from a bunch of ex-slaves, but we came from a great people? And it says many of their works were burned by the Catholic Church and government of the East and the West because they were jealous. They didn't want people to realize that these people were a great people. So they tried to erase their history. Just like people are crying out against critical race theory, which they think is being taught in our schools, which is only being taught in law schools. They're trying to keep people from learning the true history of our people. And the Israelites, because of they were great administrators, handled the economic affairs of kings, nobles, aristocrats, as well as the church, the Catholic Church. They also collected taxes, which probably wasn't the greatest thing they could have done, because anybody who collected taxes usually also collect the anger and animosity of all the people they're collecting taxes from. The Spanish and the Portuguese Israelites had to pay a tax for living on the peninsula, which was probably a constant reminder that they weren't permanent citizens there, that their citizenship could have been taken at any time. And they were required to live in a separate quarters called ghettos. And we know that stereotypically, ghettos is a place where black people live, poor black people. But we know that isn't always the case. And they were required to wear identification bands. They couldn't bear arms, so they couldn't defend themselves. Yet with all of this, they became very wealthy and rose to the highest places in government and society, which attracted the envy and the jealousy of non-Israelites, especially from the Catholic Church. And just think about, the modern day equivalent of that, not today, but, years back with Black Wall Street, and how those people were wealthy and how they lived in the best houses. They owned their own businesses, and they dressed well, and they drove cars, and they were very, very wealthy people. But it attracted the animosity of the non-black people who lived in those communities, and they came in and burned the whole community down and destroyed it. The Israelites in Spain and Portugal were very flashy. Like I said, just like the people on the Black Wall Street, they showed their money. They showed their wealth. They lived in the finest houses. They had manicured lawns. So it attracted the animosity of the non-Israelite people in Spain and Portugal. Both the church and the kings and aristocracy coveted the great wealth of the Israelites. They were like, how can we get that money? How can we get to it? How can we get those houses? And how can we get their farms and whatever they own? So the church didn't see Christianity as a progression of the Israelite religion, but they saw it as an opposition uh, to their dominance and control of religion. So instead of working with the Israelites, they began to work against them to wipe out their culture and their religious practices. One thing you need to note here is that it was Rome in 70 AD that attacked Israel and destroyed them as a nation. The Christian Roman Catholic Church has always hated Israel and the Israelite religious practices. In Psalms 83, starting at verse 1, it says, O God, do not keep silent. Do not hold your peace or be still, O God, for behold, your enemies make an uproar. Those who hate you have raised their heads. They lay crafty plans against your people. They consult together against your treasured ones. They say, come, let us wipe them out as a nation. Let the name of Israel be remembered no more. For they conspire with one accord. Against you they make a covenant. So there's a covenant between certain nations to destroy the name of Israel. So the Roman Catholic Church has always hated Israel. So due to the envy and the jealousy of the church, it led them to persecute the Israelites. Many were forcibly converted, killed, and sold into slavery into Africa to the Moors who were once their allies. So not only were the Israelites going into Africa to escape persecution, but some were also being sold into slavery there. So that destroys the myth of Africans selling other Africans. It was Africans selling Israelites. It wasn't Africans selling Africans. The converted Israelites were called Anuzim, or Force, or Morenos, Cristianos, Novos, or New Christians. Maranatha, which means a curse. Some of the Israelites of Spain and Portugal claimed their descent from the royal house of David. Just imagine that some of us are royalty. So we're gonna begin on our timeline in the year of 1478, and we're gonna build our way up to 1492, and that's the year that all the Spanish and Portuguese Israelites were expelled from Spain and Portugal, and also during that time is the time that the Spanish so-called discovered America, and they would need black bodies, melanated bodies, to go into those hot climates to work and build those new nations. So in 1478, Pope Sixtus IV signed a bull authorizing Ferdinand and Isabella to appoint bishops, archbishops, and other persons, clerical and lay, to conduct investigations into heresy and those who protected them, led by the Dominican order of the Catholic Church. And then in 1480, the Inquisition actually began, both in Spain and Portugal. And the whole focus of the Inquisition was devoted to the Morenos, or New Christians, and otherwise the converted Israelites who converted from being Israelites to Christians. So one of the most severe punishments for heresy, as defined by the Catholic Church, was an auto de fe, which means the burning at the stake. And another punishment was that if you committed heresy, was convicted of heresy, was to be exiled into Africa. So in 1482, the Catholic Church established what's called an edict or act of grace for 30 days. And what that was they gave the Morenos, the converted Israelites, a chance to come forth and confess that they had backslidden back into the practice of their Israelite culture without punishment. So not only were the Israelites expelled from Spain and Portugal, there were many expulsions from other European countries. In 1290, the Israelites were expelled by King Edward I from England. And then again in 1306, Philip Le Bel expelled them from France. They were recalled and expelled again in 1394. They were also expelled from northern Italy Sicily, and various states in Germany. So we see the curse of Deuteronomy 28, verses 64 through 66 in operation in the Israelites' lives. And it says, "And the Lord will scatter you among all peoples, from one end of the earth to the other. And there you shall serve other gods of wood and stone, which neither you nor your fathers have known. And among these nations you shall find no respite, and there shall be no resting place for the sole of your foot. But the Lord will give you there a trembling heart, and failing eyes, and a languishing soul. Your life shall hang in doubt before you." And that's exactly what happened to them in all of these nations where they were scattered. So now we have arrived to the year 1492, March the 31st. An edict was signed that all non-baptized Israelites were banished from all Spanish dominions, including the island of Sicily and Sardinia, within a 4-month period. All who remained after the time limit faced death and confiscation of their entire estates to the royal treasury. So you see the covetous goal of stealing all the Israelites' wealth coming to fruition. They were not allowed to take gold or silver with them. So most of their wealth went into the hands of either the church or the aristocracy in Spain and Portugal. And since they couldn't take gold or silver with them, because of this situation, many of them sold their large estates worth millions probably for a little of nothing. They sold them for horses or a horse's saddle, something that they could carry with them to their next destination on ships. So after expulsion, some of the Israelites went to Morocco and Algiers, where they were sold into slavery, and some were even starved to death. Some went to Turkey, some went to Italy, where they were received hospitably. Most went into Portugal with the payment of a capitalization tax, and were only allowed to stay for 8 months, and then they would have to leave. So now the west coast of Africa is seeing a large population of Israelites. After the expulsion, those ships dropped those Israelites off onto barren coasts of Africa to starve to death or to be sold as slaves to the Moors. So not only were there Israelites who already lived in Africa, but now there were those who went there to escape persecution, those who were sold into slavery there, and now those who were exiled onto the west coast of Africa. Their children between the ages of 3 and 10, whose parents couldn't pay the capitalization tax, were taken from them, and those who were forced to be left behind were sent to the island of Saint Thomé or Saint Thomas. And in 1496, King Manuel ordered that all non-converted native Israelites should leave Portugal. So those who had left Spain and went into Portugal and stayed for those few months, now they would have to leave and be exiled from Portugal and go into Africa. And they were required to leave within 10 months, or all of their property would be confiscated, which would go to those who informed them. So the non-Israelites, if they informed and told them that they didn't leave, they would be awarded their wealth. So all their children under 14 will be taken from them and given to Christians. So these are pictures of the residents of St. Thomé or St. Thomas, and you see that they are all African-looking people. Before the Israelites got there, the island was desolate. There was nobody there. So now we see the people and we see what they look like, and we know that these were black people who were exiled from the nations of Spain and Portugal. The Inquisition, which lasted from 1478 to 1834, was not just contained in Spain, but all the colonies of Spain, which included Africa, Asia, and the Americas. The Portuguese set up colonies and plantations on the coast of Africa where they sent many of the exiled Israelites, and the Israelites were enslaved on those plantations. And now we get to 1492 with the discovery of new colonies for Spain. The Spanish Empire would expand across the Caribbean islands, which include the island of Haiti, the Dominican Republic, Cuba, Jamaica, and Puerto Rico, and also half of South America, almost all of Central America, and most of North America. These areas are hot climates and would need cheap labor and melanated bodies to work these plantations. Are you seeing the link now between the Inquisition and the transatlantic slave trade, and the answer to where the Portuguese got these slaves? So these are some of the questions I want to leave with you. So what happened to these Israelites who were exiled from Spain and Portugal and sent to Africa? And does the Bible tell us what happened to them? We know that Spain and Portugal were the main merchants of the transatlantic slave trade. Where did they get these slaves from? Did they risk their lives going into Africa and capturing Africans from other nations? Or did they already have some slaves that they could trade without stirring up strife with Africa? And who were the Africans selling? Were they mainly selling their own sisters and brothers, or were they selling another people? So those are the questions that I want you to think about as we continue this study. And may God bless you and have a great day.